quality of life of an obese child is the same as a child on cancer chemotherapy.
Is there any kind of cure for obesity, or is it just eating better?
The idea of eat less, exercise more. It's just what the food industry wanted you to believe.
Robert Lustig is one of the most recognized
metabolic physicians in the world.
He spent decades fighting the greatest threat to human health
in modern history.
Obesity.
Should sugar be regulated like alcohol?
I think so. How many people do you know who say to you, oh, I have a horrible sweet tooth? And that's because it's socially acceptable.
Do you think these food companies have blood on their hands?
The answer is?
Okay, I have here
Yes.
3 soda brands.
Oh, yes.
Which are the worst for you and why?
They're all just as bad as the others. There's nothing inherently different about any of them. Now, actually, the Coke and the Pepsi, because they have caramel coloring, some people will argue that that might actually engender a slight worsening in terms of metabolic health. The data on that are pretty flimsy. Really, the biggest problem is the sugar. The second big problem is the phosphoric acid. And all of them have all of those. So I really don't think there's much difference.
Okay, but wait, I have something else. We have here diet.
Yep.
Diet caffeine free.
Caffeine free, yep.
And we have Coke Zero.
Oh boy. We really are after a big game today, aren't we?
So tell me about these 3.
They don't have calories. That's good. They don't have fructose, the sweet molecule in sugar that's addictive. That's good. They still have caffeine, except for the caffeine-free one. Okay. But they have a diet sweetener. Each of them has a diet sweetener. And the question is, are diet sweeteners safe? And the answer is, no, they're not. Now, we thought that the only problems were the calories and the fructose. Turns out, from work done at the Weizmann Institute in Israel, that those diet sweeteners actually alter the microbiome. They change microbial diversity. They lead to what we commonly refer to as leaky gut, which leads to insulin resistance and glucose intolerance as well. So you've traded in one problem for another. And it doesn't really matter which diet sweetener. They all seem to have essentially the same metabolic profile, whether it's sugar alcohols like erythritol or xylitol, which has now been shown to contribute to cardiovascular disease, monk fruit concentrate, stevia. They all cause insulin release, and the insulin drives chronic metabolic disease and also weight gain. There are no data anywhere in the world that shows that consuming these drinks actually promotes weight loss. None. And the question is, if you're consuming diet drinks instead of regular drinks, shouldn't you lose weight? Well, the answer is no. And the reason is because if you're still raising insulin, you're not getting much bang for your buck.
And what would happen if you woke up tomorrow morning and all of these were eradicated?
All 6 of them?
Yeah.
There would be others to take their place because, there's an incentive. The incentive is addiction. And basically, you can look at every commodity that's currently on the market. Okay? If you look at the top 10 commodities worldwide, 4 of them are addictive. And so you're not going to make much headway in terms of doing that unless there's a reason not to consume them, unless you either pass regulation or legislation or litigation that ultimately impacts on that. Example, alcohol. Okay? We have all sorts of regulatory processes for alcohol. We have 1,500 years of alcohol control policy. Does it work? And the answer is, well, yeah. I mean, obviously, there are still drunk drivers out there, but there are way fewer than there used to be, and the reason is because we set the bar pretty darn high. Right? So it can be done. What about tobacco? Okay, once upon a time, everybody smoked. Okay, it was fashionable to smoke. Today, it's filthy habit. All right, how did that happen? Okay, think of it this way: we have seen 4 cultural tectonic shifts in society over the last 30 years. And here they are. Number one, bicycles and seatbelts. Number two, smoking in public places. Number three, drunk driving. Number four, condoms in bathrooms. 30 years ago, if a legislator stood up in a state house or in Congress or in Parliament or in the Duma or anywhere else in the world and proposed legislation for any one of those four things, they'd have gotten laughed right out of town. Probably lose their job. Okay? Nanny state, liberty interest, get out of my kitchen, get out of my bathroom, get out of my car. Today, they're all facts of life. No one's belly aching about any of those four. They're all settled. Now, we have new things to bellyache about, like vaccines. Okay, so it's never going to go away. But those four, we've figured it out. We've figured out how to deal with those. We've learned how to make peace with them, at least to some extent. Okay? For sugar, we have nothing. We have no intervention at the personal level, and we have no intervention at the societal level. And the reason is because people still think that sugar is just calories. It's not. Sugar is a mitochondrial toxin. You're actually poisoning yourself when you drink a soda. Okay? Now, it's not severe. It's mild. You may not feel it, at least today. In the same way, if you smoked a cigarette, you wouldn't necessarily feel it. Now, if you smoked 10,000 cigarettes in one day, you might feel it. If you smoked 10,000 cigarettes over 10 years, you might feel it. But on any one given day, a certain amount of acute toxin's not going to kill you. That's what you got here. But long-term, chronically, that's what we've got. So the question is, what are we going to do about it as a society? And, that's above my pay grade.
And we're going to talk about that. And when it comes to sugar, is moderation okay for an individual?
So depends what you mean by moderation. If you mean letting people make their own decisions, well, that's all we have. So it's got to be okay because that's all we have. But really, the way to moderate people's consumption is by reducing the availability in the first place. That's called the iron law of public health. And it worked for tobacco and it worked for alcohol. So the iron law of public health goes like this. Reducing the availability of a substance reduces its consumption, which reduces health harms. It's a law. Okay, you can go all the way back through history. That's the way it is. Reducing availability reduces consumption, which reduces health harms. Now, how do you reduce availability of sugar when it's everywhere? When it's in every ultra-processed food, when it's on every grocery store shelf, when it's in every school? And why is it in every product, on every grocery shelf, and in every school? And the answer is, because it's addictive, because there's a profit motive involved. So, could we do something about that? And the answer is, yes, we can. In fact, I am the chief science officer and co-founder of a nonprofit here in the Bay Area called Eat Real, and our job is to get real food into K-12 schools around the country, and we are going national. We have already touched 1 million kids, and we've already gotten 30 million pounds of sugar out of their diet every year. Now, is anyone complaining about that? Only the soft drink companies.
You said we've gotten nutrition wrong for 30 plus years. What did you see that no one else did?
Everyone thought it was about calories because, number one, we were told it. We learned it. I learned it. Okay? I majored in nutritional biochemistry in college at MIT, and I learned back then that different calories were metabolized differently. Then I went to medical school, and they beat it out of me and told me that's not how we take care of patients. None of that matters. It's only about calories. And so I practiced for the first 20 years of my career with that in mind, because after all, this is how the gurus do it. This is what I learned in medical school. This is what I, paid big money, to learn. So why would I argue against it? Problem was, none of my patients were getting better. And then I started doing research into the field and started actually questioning that concept of just calories. And it turned out that sugar was not just calories. Yes, of course, it's 4 calories per gram, and glucose is 4 calories per gram, fructose is 4 calories per gram, protein is 4 calories per gram, but they are clearly, none of those 3 things are metabolized the same way, and all 3 of them have different effects on the body, on the organism, that ultimately lead to metabolic mayhem, and fructose being the most egregious. Why? So each of the following 4 things that I'm going to explain to you have nothing to do with calories. Number 1, fructose causes fatty liver. Fructose is metabolized in the liver like alcohol, generating fat. And that fat deposits, and that's why we have this epidemic of non-alcoholic fatty liver disease, now known as metabolic associated steatotic liver disease. We went from NAFLD to MASLD. Who cares? It's the same disease. It's fatty liver, and 5-year-olds get it. Now, when I was a med student 50 years ago, the only people who had fatty liver disease were alcoholics. Now we have 5-year-olds with fatty liver disease, and they don't drink alcohol. The key is that fructose and alcohol are metabolized the same way. So it doesn't really matter. Fructose is the alcohol of the child. And that's why it's in every breakfast cereal, because fructose is the alcohol of the child. So that's problem number 1. Problem number 2, fructose causes the aging reaction, the browning reaction, the caramelization reaction, known in science as the Maillard reaction. That causes proteins to brown, to become less flexible. And every time that reaction occurs, you generate a reactive oxygen species, which does damage, which has to be cleared or quenched. Fructose does it 7 times faster than glucose. And fructose generates a metabolite when it's turned into energy that actually binds to the enzyme that controls mitochondria and causes mitochondrial dysfunction. Number 3, fructose affects the microbiome. Glucose does not. Fructose causes the bacteria in your intestine to change and changes microbial diversity, changes the tight junctions that hold the intestinal cells together to present a barrier so that bad stuff in your intestine doesn't get into your bloodstream to cause inflammation. Well, fructose does that and glucose doesn't. And then finally, number 4, fructose is addictive and glucose isn't. Fructose goes to the area of the brain that controls reward and generates reward just like nicotine, alcohol, cocaine, heroin, or behaviors like shopping, gambling, internet gaming, social media, pornography. Anything that causes a dopamine release is in the extreme addictive. Fructose is, in the extreme, addictive. The problem is we're extreme.
Guys, we've been so passionate about finding the biggest geniuses, and this is just one of the many episodes. If you want to make sure you don't miss the next one, make sure to subscribe. All right, let's get back to the episode. Why is eat less, move more not enough? And what is?
Well, eat less, move more is based on calories. Calories in, calories out. Gluttony and sloth. And there's a reason why that took hold. There's a reason why everyone believes that. Okay? If you're fat, it's your fault. Blame the victim. We're really good at it in our society. Blame the victim. We've been doing that for a while. Okay? The fact of the matter is, this is not a victim issue. Okay? Because everyone's exposed and everyone is susceptible. Okay? There's a reason why we've gone from 5% obesity in 1970 to 45% obesity today. Is it that everyone all of a sudden just became gluttons and sloths? The fact of the matter is, the biochemistry drives the behavior. And we proved that in a study that we did many, many years ago, where we knocked down the insulin released by glucose and fructose using a medication. And when we did that, not only did the patients lose weight, but their caloric intake went down remarkably, and their exercise went up remarkably. And they didn't just reduce their calorie intake, they reduced their sugar intake. They went from 47% of calories as carbohydrate to 35% of calories as carbohydrate. So that's not an anorexia. That's not a reduction in just food intake. That's a change in taste preference. So when you get the insulin down, you actually change what you eat. And the food industry knows that, and that's why they keep plying us with sugar.
Is hunger something that we control or something that controls us?
Oh, hunger controls us, without question. Now, there are many reasons to eat. 3 big ones: hunger, reward, stress. Every one of those is a reason to eat. Now, hunger controls us because when we're starving, we're very hungry. Reward controls us because if reward didn't control us, these would not exist. And stress controls us because stress is a mollification for the pain. That's how we mollify the pain of our lives, of the emotional pain of living, of dealing with all of the hardships that we as human beings deal with on a day-to-day basis. Point is, stress-induced eating is a well-known driver. We actually did a study years ago where we gave an opiate antagonist to postmenopausal women. And what we showed was that the more stress they had at baseline, the more the opiate antagonist caused nausea, and also the more weight loss occurred. So, in fact, their stress was driving their food intake. And we could actually mitigate that by getting in the middle of their stress pathway.
Are obese people biologically driven?
Absolutely. Obese people are biologically driven, and they can be driven at many different levels, but they are all driven. The idea that they have choice, who would choose to be obese? Certainly not a child. Okay? The quality of life of an obese child is the same as a child on cancer chemotherapy. I mean, who would choose that? Now, you could argue that some adults choose to be obese. Like, for instance, Rossini, the famous Italian composer, he chose to be a gastronome. He chose to be a gourmand, and he died at age 37 of obesity-related disease. You could argue he chose it, maybe, but 5-year-olds don't choose to be obese. 6-month-olds don't choose to be obese. We have an epidemic of obese 6-month-olds. And most importantly, newborns don't choose to be obese. 4 separate studies, United States, South Africa, Israel, Russia. Over the last 25 years, there's been a secular trend of an increasing body weight at birth by 200 grams, half a pound. Babies born in those 4 countries weigh a half a pound more on average than they did 25 years ago. Now, the question is, what is that half a pound? When you stick them in a DEXA scanner to find out, it's all fat. Now, newborns don't diet and exercise. How did they get obese? So any hypothesis that you want to proffer to me about what the cause of the obesity epidemic is, you have to explain that, and you can't. And the reason is because the idea that it's about eat less, exercise more is not true. It never was. It's just what the food industry wanted you to believe.
You said fructose is a poison.
Indeed, a mitochondrial toxin.
Why?
Why? Complicated, a lot of science there. Let me try to make it easy. Fructose binds to proteins and causes them to not work well. Fructose inhibits the enzyme that controls mitochondrial function. That enzyme is called AMP kinase. So AMP kinase is like the fuel gauge on your cell. When energy stores in your cell go down, that enzyme recognizes it and revs up mitochondrial biogenesis to make more in an attempt to try to keep energy levels inside the cell at a reasonable level. Fructose interferes with that. So you run out of energy and you don't make more. So one of the problems with sugar consumption is actually fatigue. Now, you have all of these energy drinks. The reason that the energy drinks make you feel like you have energy is because of the caffeine, not because of the sugar. The sugar is actually there to hide the bitter taste of the caffeine. The caffeine is the thing that makes you think that it's supplying you with energy. Why does caffeine do that? Well, caffeine binds to a different receptor in the cell called the adenosine receptor. The adenosine receptor is the one that basically tells you to go to sleep. Okay? So when you bind to that and inhibit that, you don't go to sleep. That's why, there's a Starbucks on every corner, okay, to not go to sleep. The fact of the matter is your cell is still winding down its energy, even if you bind that receptor. So those energy drinks are false. They tell you that they're supplying you with energy. They're actually sapping you of energy.
Is there a safe dose of fructose?
Sure. In the same way there's a safe dose of VX gas, there's a safe dose of ricin and sarin, there's a safe dose of arsenic, there's a safe dose of, carbon tetrachloride. What is it? The question is, are we over it? And the answer is, we're way over it. Okay? We've looked at that question, and what I can say is our livers have an innate capacity to metabolize fructose. In the same way, our livers have an innate capacity to metabolize alcohol. So what is that amount? It's about 25 grams per day. 25 grams per day. So if you have a drink, you're okay. If you have 2 drinks, depends on how big you are. Maybe you're okay, maybe you're not. If you have 3 drinks, you're probably not okay. If you have 4 drinks, you really need somebody to drive you home. And if you have 5 drinks, you're a friggin' alcoholic. Okay? Ultimately, fructose is about the same. If you have a little bit, like for instance, a 4-ounce glass of orange juice, that's it for the whole day. That's it for the entire day. Once you get above that, you start seeing the metabolic mayhem. So we have a limited capacity to metabolize this mitochondrial toxin. After all, that is the liver's job, is to metabolize toxins. But no matter what the toxin, you can overwhelm your liver's ability. Different toxins, different dosages. Fructose happens to be a toxin where we have a better than average capacity to metabolize it. But you can get above it, and we do routinely every single day.
And what makes it different from glucose?
So glucose is a 6-membered ring. Fructose is a 5-membered ring. Glucose is transported by a set of transporters. Fructose is not transported by those transporters. It has its own transporter. Glucose goes to glycogen. Glycogen is liver starch. That's the storage form of glucose in the liver and in muscle. So that's what your body wants to do with excess energy, is put it into glycogen, because glycogen, for lack of a better word, is non-toxic. Your liver doesn't care how much glycogen it stores. We have a disorder in pediatrics that we take care of. It's called glycogen storage disease type 1A, von Gierke's disease. You can put glucose into glycogen but you can't fish it out. So these kids have livers down to their knees because they are just stuffed with glycogen that can't come out. Now, these kids are very sick. They have hypoglycemia like all get out. But do they get liver failure? No, because glycogen is non-toxic. So glucose drives glycogen formation, which is non-toxic. Fructose does not go to glycogen. Fructose goes straight to the mitochondria, causes that mitochondrial dysfunction that I mentioned. And the only organ in the body that can metabolize fructose is the liver. So you're getting the whole bolus, the whole load, straight at your liver, and it's going straight to your mitochondria, and it's causing your mitochondria to fail. So two very different molecules. They are not the same.
You've also said fructose is alcohol without the buzz.
Correct.
Is it better to consume alcohol or
I
soda?
think so.
You think so?
Let's put it this way. You can only drink yourself under the table once a day. But with these, how many liters can you consume?
Should sugar be regulated like alcohol?
I think so. Now, I've said that many times, and people think I'm absolutely a friggin' lunatic. It's very hard to do. It's not so much that we need to regulate it at the consumer level. We need to regulate it at the industry level. There is no reason why Trader Joe's beef with broccoli has 32 grams of sugar in it per serving. There is no reason for that. It's beef with broccoli. Could we do something about that? Could we set upper limits for each food stuff in order to try to reduce the total caloric burden and the total fructose burden on society? Is that possible? Could we get soda off SNAP, off the Supplementary Nutrition Assistance Program? Several states have already applied for waivers, and a couple of them have actually gotten it. Some others are in the process of doing it. I'm actually trying to help 2 states right now to do that. So these are questions.
In these soda brands on the table, what ingredients would you take out and what would you replace them with?
So the fructose is the big problem. That's the big kahuna. Could we take the fructose out? Well, obviously, if we did, it would be less sweet. Could you put something else in that could take its place? And the answer is the diet sweetener that seems to be the safest currently, and we need more research on all of these, but the one that seems to have the best biochemical profile in studies that have been done thus far, and I put that as a big caveat because I don't know, and I don't want anybody coming back to me saying, but you said, okay? But today, what we know, the most appropriate diet sweetener would be a sugar. It's a naturally occurring sugar. It's called allulose. Allulose is an epimer, an isomer of fructose. It's not metabolized. It doesn't go to the liver. It goes out in the urine. It's mildly sweet. It has a sweetness index of 70, whereas sucrose, table sugar, has a sweetness index of 100. And lab fructose, isolated from glucose, has a sweetness index of 173. So allulose is what we call a sugar extender. You could put a little bit of sugar in to get the buzz, to get the reward, and you could make up the difference with allulose. Now, the reason they haven't done that yet is because allulose is expensive. But the price is coming down because there are 2 new ways to make it. So we'll see.
And why is liquid sugar worse than solid?
Well, liquid sugar is, to some extent, dissolved in a food matrix. And that food matrix can sometimes be helpful in terms of reducing the rate of absorption. Perfect example of this is fruit. Fruit has fiber. The fiber is the matrix. So if you look at absorption of glucose or fructose from a juice or from a sauce like applesauce or from fruit like apple, What you see is that the apple juice, all of it gets absorbed. From the apple, you get only about half absorbed. From the apple sauce, it's much more like the juice. So the patency of the matrix, in this case the fiber, is actually helping to mitigate some of the metabolic consequences. That's why I say fruit is good and juice is bad. So the question is, why does the industry take the fiber out? And the answer is for profit. Because you can't freeze fiber. I'll prove it to you. Take an orange, put it in your freezer overnight, take it out the next morning, put it on your kitchen countertop, let it thaw, try to eat it, see what you get. You get mush. Why do you get mush? Because the ice crystals macerate the cell wall, let all the water rush in, makes it unedible. Hey, food industry knows that. So what do? They squeeze it and freeze it. Now it lasts forever. Now they can sell it as frozen concentrated orange juice. They've turned a food, into a commodity. Because the definition of commodity is storable food. So they've reduced their depreciation, therefore they've increased their profit. Good for them, bad for you.
Okay, let's say that you're running the largest food brand in the US. What tactics would you implement to convince me that sugar is beneficial?
That sugar is beneficial?
Yes.
Okay, so I have to be the bad guy here. I'm playing bad guy.
For now.
Okay, well, we just published a paper in the New England Journal of Medicine, the very first time that the New England Journal actually admits that corporations cause disease. And it's called Corporate Vectors of Chronic Disease, like corporations are mosquitoes, which they are. Now, how do they do that? How do they do that? They do it three ways. We've discovered the corporate playbook. And by the way, the playbook is the same for opioids, for petroleum, for big pharma, for tobacco, for ultra-processed food. It's all the same. How do they do it? First thing they do is they obfuscate the science. Example of that, sugar is calories. That's what we've been told for 100 years now. Sugar is just calories. Clearly not true. They obfuscate the regulation and the policy. Like, for instance, lobbying Congress to keep soda on SNAP. Because if soda's on SNAP, then how could it be bad for you? Right? We're giving it to poor people. Must be good for you. And finally, framing the narrative. And they're very good at that. Perfect example of that is Coca-Cola's long-standing campaign, Open Happiness. Any happiness in that bottle? So fructose is a mitochondrial toxin. Carbonated water, no effects that I know of. Caffeine is addictive. And what else is in there? Caramel coloring. And there might be reasons to be concerned about that because it might generate reactive oxygen species. So, any happiness in that bottle? A lot of pleasure with, sugar and caffeine. Not arguing that. But any happiness? So then you have to get to the question of, well, what's pleasure and what's happiness? Will, do you know the difference between pleasure and happiness?
My thought would be pleasure is that dopamine hit, and maybe happiness is
not
long-term.
Not. That's right. Well,
happiness is not getting a dopamine hit.
That's one way to frame it. There are actually 7 differences between pleasure and happiness. And Americans don't know. They don't understand because they've been told their entire lives that pleasure is happiness by Coca-Cola, by bars, like happy hour, okay, etc. And we can go down the list. Okay, so what are the differences between pleasure and happiness? 7 that I can count. Number 1, pleasure is short-lived, like a meal. Happiness is long-lived, like a lifetime. especially a lifetime of service. Number 2, pleasure is visceral. You feel it in your body. Happiness is ethereal. You feel it above the neck. Number 3, pleasure is taking, like from a casino. Happiness is giving, like to Habitats for Humanity. Number 4, pleasure is experienced alone. Happiness is usually experienced in social groups. Number 5, pleasure can be achieved with substances. Happiness cannot be achieved with substances. Number 6, the extremes of pleasure, whether it be substances or behaviors, we've mentioned them already. Substances like cocaine, heroin, nicotine, alcohol, sugar, or behaviors like shopping, gambling, internet gaming, social media, pornography, they all lead to dopamine release. There's an aholic after every one of those. Shopaholic, sexaholic, alcoholic, chocoholic. Because in the extreme, anything that causes dopamine release also leads to addiction. Overwhelming the reward center is the hallmark of addiction, and sugar can do that. And finally, number 7, pleasure is dopamine and happiness is serotonin. 2 different neurotransmitters, 2 different areas of the brain, 2 different sets of receptors, 2 different mechanisms of action, 2 different clearance mechanisms. And you say to me, like, why do we care? They both feel good. Well, dopamine is this feels good, I want more. And serotonin is this feels good, I don't want or need any more. I am content. Most people in America don't even know what that feels like. They don't even understand that concept because their entire lives they've been told that pleasure is happiness. That's a problem. Did you ever see Pharrell Williams' Happy 12 a.m. YouTube video? What's he doing at 12 a.m.? He's in a fast food, gas station in the middle of, South Central LA, okay, buying O. Henry's and Red Bulls and potato chips. That's his idea of happy. You really think that's happy? I got a bridge to sell you. So, why do we care? Here's the reason. Dopamine is an excitatory neurotransmitter. Now, what does that mean? It means when dopamine is released and it binds to the receptor on the next neuron, it excites the next neuron. It doesn't inhibit the next neuron, it excites it. Now, neurons like to be excited, that's why they have receptors, but neurons like to be tickled, not bludgeoned. They like to be stimulated, and then they like to go to rest. They like to be stimulated, and they like to go to rest. And the reason is because every time they're stimulated, they're using up cellular energy. They're using up ATP, adenosine triphosphate, the chemical energy that drives the cell, that powers the cell. Well, neurotransmission is friggin' expensive when it comes to energy, okay? It's like your Hummer, okay? It's chewing through gas like nobody's business. And so you need to be able to bring it to rest and fill it up again. Chronic overstimulation of any neuron, anywhere in the brain, anywhere in the body, leads to neuronal cell death. Now, neurons don't want to die. So they have a plan B. They downregulate the receptor. They downregulate the dopamine receptor, so there's less chance that a dopamine molecule will find a receptor to bind to. And what that does is that limits the response, limits the firing. We have a name for this. It's called tolerance. In human terms, you get a hit, you get a rush, receptors go down. Next time you need a bigger hit to get the same rush, receptors go down. Then you need a bigger hit and a bigger hit and a bigger hit and a bigger hit until finally you need a huge hit to get nothing. That's tolerance. That's the law of diminishing returns. And then when the neurons actually do start to die, that's addiction. And those neurons ain't coming back. So the brain has a mechanism to keep that dopamine at bay, to basically put a premium on neuronal survival. Problem is, you can overcome it. And we do every day. Serotonin, on the other hand, this other neurotransmitter, it doesn't stimulate the next neuron. It inhibits the next neuron. It puts the next neuron to rest. Now, if you're putting the next neuron to rest, do you need to worry about downregulating the receptor? No. So serotonin basically doesn't obey the law of diminishing returns. Okay? Serotonin is what basically chills you out. Contentment. And so there is no law of diminishing returns. There is no tolerance. So, bottom line, there's no such thing as overdosing on too much happiness. However, there's one thing that downregulates serotonin: dopamine. So the more pleasure you seek, the more unhappy you get. And we've been plied with pleasure inducing substances for decades now. And we've been told that they are all happiness.
Do you think that these companies are aware of the harm they're causing?
Oh, yes, they are. And we know they are because we have it in their own words. So at UCSF, my home institution, we have a 15 million document library called the Industry Documents Library. You can all find it at idl.ucsf.edu. It's available to everyone. It's curated. It's digitized. You can use it for your own research. It is a public service. We have analyzed, we have basically taken all 15 million documents and figured out the corporate playbook to see how corporations do what they do and what did they know and when did they know it. And we've been able to basically reconstruct the corporate playbook. And we talked about it earlier. We talked about the obfuscation of the science. We talked about the obfuscation of regulation and policy. And we talked about reframing the narrative. They do this very consciously and with malice and intent.
Do you think some companies are ignorant of this?
No. I think some companies have a little less avarice than others, but they're all very aware.
If you were the FDA or USDA, how would you fix things?
So the question is, how do you solve a societal problem? And the answer is, you need individual intervention, which we can, for lack of a better word, we can call rehab. And we need societal intervention, which, for lack of a better word, we can call laws. Rehab and laws, they work together. You need both. In order to be able to engage in either of them, you need education first. So that's the first thing, is to educate. Now, are we educating people about the dangers of ultra-processed foods, about the dangers of sugar? And the answer is yes, slowly. Even before RFK Jr., we were doing it. And I can prove it because the food industry has a public relations arm called IFIC, the International Food Information Council. And they are the public relations arm of the food industry. And every year they publish a report. And in that report, they ask the public a question each year. The question is different each year. But in 2011 and in 2018, the question was the same, phrased exactly the same. What nutrient or substance most causes weight gain? In 2011, 11% of respondents said sugar and refined carbohydrate. 50% said calorie is a calorie or I don't know. In 2018, 33% of the public said sugar and refined carbohydrate. And the number of people who went from a calorie is a calorie or I don't know went down by exactly the same amount. So we are training the public. Now, RFK Jr. has said that sugar's bad, and that's true, but he doesn't know why. And he doesn't know what to do about it. And he has not put any sort of clamps on the CPG companies, the consumer product good companies, to do anything about it at the moment. He's suggested that all of this is voluntary at the present time. And he doesn't understand the relationship between food science and nutrition and metabolic health. So I don't anticipate any good answers coming from this administration.
Is this incompetence or is it conflict of interest?
It is conflict of interest because there are a lot of people making money off this.
Should there be a sugar tax? Would money incentives solve anything?
Well, we have a soda tax in 6 cities around the United States right now, San Francisco being one of them, as well as Oakland and Albany, California, and also Philadelphia. So it is occurring, and by the way, 28 countries have a sugar tax as well for the same reasons. If you buy a soda, you have to pay a 10% surcharge in those places. The question is it a money grab or does it actually benefit the population? That's the question. Because if it's a money grab, there are a lot of ways to grab money. But if it's actually helping the population, maybe we should look at that, right? Well, we have 5 years of the San Francisco soda tax to look at. And we have shown a 77% reduction in gestational diabetes, diabetes in pregnant mothers. So we have the data to show that this benefits the public. In the same way alcohol control policy benefits the public. In the same way tobacco control policy benefits the public. And it makes sense because of the iron law of public health. Reduce effective availability. A tax basically makes it harder to get. Reduces consumption. We have the data for that, which reduces health harms. You cannot argue with a 77% reduction in gestational diabetes. That's good for everybody.
When you walk past a donut shop and you can feel your desire for sugar kicking in, right? What goes through your head to defend against that instinct?
And it's very hard because I love donuts. That's kind of a bad one for me. The fact of the matter is, I spent 17 years at UCSF being head of the obesity program. Okay? And every day at around 3 to 4 p.m., I'd get really tired. And I would go across the street and I would get a big chocolate chip cookie. This did not help. Did not help. I thought it was helping, but all it was doing was contributing to my waistline. I stopped that, and I lost 30 pounds. And so it became, shall we say, painfully obvious to me what needed to happen. And so whenever that donut sings out to me, I remember that chocolate chip cookie, and I do the right thing.
Would you consider sugar a drug, literally?
Absolutely. If it were just being developed today, the FDA wouldn't even approve it because of all of its toxicities. Now, it got grandfathered in 1958. The GRAS list, the generally recognized as safe list, was formulated by Congress. And at that time, there were 158 items on the GRAS list. 158 items that the food industry could use to their heart's content with abandon. Today, there are 10,000. Do you really think there are 10,000 things you can put in your mouth without it hurting you? Really? Do you really? Point is, sugar is a toxin. It's just a chronic toxin, not an acute toxin. If it were an acute toxin, we'd know it and we'd have banned it already. It's a chronic toxin. Look how hard it was to ban cigarettes. We still haven't. That's a chronic toxin too. So why would we expect any different? The difference is that for tobacco, we have some laws in place, and we have rehab available for people who need it. For sugar, we have nothing. That's my job, is to fix that.
Yeah, and it plays to like, why do people feel out of control?
Why does anybody who's addicted to anything feel out of control? How many people do you know who say to you, oh, I have a horrible sweet tooth?
A lot.
A lot, yeah, right. Why do they feel okay saying that to you? Two reasons. One, it's socially acceptable. And two, they're looking for a codependent. They're looking for an enabler. Okay? And that's because it's socially acceptable. Once upon a time, cigarettes were socially acceptable. Now they're not. You think anybody goes up to people anymore and bums a cigarette off them? Like never. Okay? That's gone. Used to be pretty standard. Now it's gone. Okay? So social constructs change how we feel about these things. We have to basically rethink our relationship with not just sugar, but with ultra-processed foods. And we have to come to a better answer and a better understanding so that, number one, society benefits rather than is hurt by it. At the same time that companies can still make money. I'm not against companies making money, but they have to make money doing the right thing, not the wrong thing.
What would that look like? Let's take a company, right? Like Coca-Cola. What would that look like?
Well, could Coca-Cola make money selling water?
They do, don't they?
Yes, they do. They certainly do.
Right.
So why don't we do this? Okay? Why don't we tax the sugared soda and use the money from the tax to subsidize water? Coca-Cola's not out anything because you still got to drink.
True, but do they have an incentive to want the tax on sugar because there'll be maybe much less consumption? That consumption that doesn't necessarily go to them purchasing water from Coca-Cola. That the cola consumption would go down.
Well, that depends on how much they charge for it, and it depends on where they do it. Because there are a lot of water supplies around the country that kind of taste pretty bad. So a lot of people are looking for bottled water. Why do you think the bottled water market took off like it did? This is known as differential subsidization. Okay? Tax the offending substance and use the money from the tax to subsidize the non-offending substance. So the question is, does it work? I'll give you an example. 1977. 3 countries, Norway, Sweden, Denmark. Huge alcohol problem. Okay? Because it's dank and it's dark and it's damp and it's cold and no Netflix back then. And so people drank themselves to death. And it was appearing on both sides of the ledger, the economic ledger. Okay? It was appearing on the positive side of the ledger in terms of reduced productivity because people calling in on their benders. And it was showing up on the negative side of the ledger in terms of cirrhosis of the liver and car accidents. So these 3 countries, Norway, Sweden, Denmark, banded together and passed 2 pieces of legislation that were yoked together. They were passed specifically to coexist with each other. First piece of legislation, they nationalized all the liquor stores in all 3 countries. So every liquor store sold the same fare at the same price. You couldn't go someplace else and buy it cheaper. And the second was they taxed high alcohol spirits, and they used the money from the tax to subsidize low alcohol beer. So it was a zero-sum game to the country. They were not the government. They were not making any money off of it. Okay? So the question is, did that work? And the answer is, over the course of 20 years, from 1977 to 1997, they saw a reduction in cirrhosis of the liver and car accidents, and they saw an increase in productivity in all 3 countries. And if you go to any of those countries, those 2 pieces of legislation are still in place 40 years later. Because they worked. Because they worked. Okay? So the concept of differential subsidization is something that we could do. And nobody would be out anything. Okay? Those countries still sell alcohol. We could still sell, bottled water or, sparkling water or whatever. Okay? And people would be much healthier, much happier, and the government wouldn't be paying out in terms of chronic disease, and we could actually balance the budget.
Let's talk about metabolic damage. What does it take for someone to go from, let's say, neutral health to morbidly obese in the shortest time possible?
Well, I think Robert De Niro did that in Raging Bull. In 1980, when he was playing Jake LaMotta, he gained 60 pounds in a very short period of time by packing on the pounds and eating a whole lot of ice cream. He was able to take it off in part because he was able to reset his body's thermostat, if you will, to bring that caloric intake down. That's because his biochemistry still worked. The hormone that basically told his brain he was full, leptin, still worked. But today, obesity is leptin resistance. That leptin is not working. And the question is, why is it not working? Because if it was working, you wouldn't be obese. So how can you have a high leptin level and still be obese? Because leptin's supposed to tell your brain you've had enough. But clearly, we haven't had enough because we keep eating and we keep gaining weight. So something is interfering with that leptin signal. So we now know what it is. It's insulin. Insulin inhibits leptin signaling. Insulin is an endogenous leptin antagonist. Insulin blocks leptin signaling at the level of the brain. Now, why would God do that to us? What's the selective advantage for insulin to block leptin? And the answer is 2. Puberty and pregnancy. Puberty and pregnancy are necessary for survival of the species. Puberty means you have to eat more. Pregnancy means you have to eat more. If you don't eat more, you don't get puberty, you don't get pregnancy. Species dies out. So there has to be something that blocks the signal that tells you you've had enough. And doesn't it make sense that the hormone that drives the weight gain peripherally is also the hormone that blocks the signal for satiety centrally? That's the only way to do it. That's how you interfere with the negative feedback. Insulin blocks leptin. The problem is the higher the insulin goes, the less well your brain can see its leptin. The problem is that 93% of Americans have high insulin. 93% have metabolic dysfunction as manifest by fasting hyperinsulinemia. Why is 93% of America metabolically ill? And the answer is sugar, ultra-processed food.
And is that something that those 93% can come back from?
Absolutely. But we have to fix the food.
Even if you end up losing the weight, is there still long-term damage?
There can be, but what we've seen is that the earlier you do it, the more likely that damage can be ameliorated. The later you go, the harder it is to fix the damage. Sometimes you're left with problems. Like, for instance, type 2 diabetes. Can you reverse type 2 diabetes? The answer is yes, you can. Okay? We do it routinely now through a ketogenic diet or just getting rid of all sugar or a high fiber diet. We can change the diet and mitigate the negative consequences. But what we've learned is that in order to basically come off all medications, in order to completely put type 2 diabetes in remission, you have to do it relatively soon after you've been diagnosed. The longer you wait, the more likely those beta cells in your pancreas will not come back. So there's a point of no return.
Do you think these food companies have blood on their hands?
That's a good question. I think they know that their products are dangerous. So if the tobacco companies had blood on their hands, then the ultra-processed food companies do too. If they didn't know, it would be different, but they know. And we know they know because we have it in their own words.
Is their marketing just them blatantly lying?
Oh, almost exclusively lying. No argument there. What they do is they hide behind this concept of calories, and they also hide behind this concept of blame the victim. Personal responsibility. Every single food company has basically weighed in on the concept of personal responsibility. After all, you have free agency, you have free will. Therefore, you have freedom to choose. Therefore, if you choose wrong, it's your fault. Therefore, you suffer the consequences. The question is, are you free to choose? Are you really? You're free to choose the difference between the chocolate or the vanilla ice cream, that's true. But are you really free to choose? The concept of addiction takes the concept of freedom to choose and basically flushes it in the toilet. That's what addiction is. You can know in your heart of hearts that whatever it is you're addicted to is ruining your life, your health, your economy, your liberty, your community, your family. And you are completely powerless to do anything about it because the biochemical drive to consume is greater than any cognitive inhibition that you can bring to the table. That's the definition of addiction. So if something's addictive, are you free to choose? In fact, if you're peddling something addictive and you say you're free to choose, really what you're doing is you're free to blame. And that's what freedom to choose really means, is freedom to blame.
What's the fakest healthy food and why?
Probably granola. Granola has got this health halo, and it's basically half sugar. For the most part, there's virtually no fiber in most commercial granola. And, people say it's a health food, but it's not. Another one is yogurt. So there's something called plain yogurt. How many grams of sugar in a standard tub of plain yogurt? About 7. All lactose, milk sugar, not a problem, not metabolically dangerous. How many grams of sugar in a strawberry yogurt? 23 grams of sugar. So there's 16 grams of added sugar. The question is, do the benefits of the plain yogurt outweigh the detriments of the 16 grams of sugar? And the answer is not even close.
And what about sugar from fruit, right? You said strawberries, right?
Sugar, if it's in the fruit.
If it's in the fruit,
If
it's
it's in the
okay.
fruit.
If it's added sugar, it's not.
If it's added sugar, it's not. If you squeeze it and or macerate the fiber and dissociate the sugar from the food matrix, then you absorb it just as rapidly and your liver gets just as sick.
So orange juice, you
Orange juice is a
squeeze the
problem.
oranges and
Leave the orange
you don't add
intact.
you don't add any new sugar, but that's a problem.
Still a problem. Orange juice is basically like orange soda.
Wow. I didn't know that.
Yeah.
Wow. What did we remove from our food that our bodies need?
So fiber is one. We need somewhere between 25 and 50 grams of fiber per day. And that fiber has to be both soluble and insoluble, which is what you get in real food. Okay? Several companies will add fiber back, like Fiber One bars. That is soluble fiber. You need the insoluble fiber. Turns out the insoluble fiber, the cellulose, the stringy stuff in celery, turns out to be more metabolically advantageous than the soluble fiber. You need both. food industry takes both out. And the reason is, again, you can't freeze fiber. Your microbiome, the bacteria in your intestine, they live with you, okay? You are 10 trillion cells, but you have 100 trillion bacteria in your intestine, okay? They outnumber you 10 to 1. They want to survive. They got to eat. Well, what do they eat? Well, they eat what you eat. The question is, how much did you get versus how much did they get? And what they want to eat is fiber. You can't digest fiber. That's why it's fiber. They can. They have the enzymes to digest fiber. They can use the fiber to power those bacteria. Now, the problem is they don't want to die. They don't want to starve. So if you eat a fiberless diet, which is basically an ultra-processed food diet, those bacteria are not getting the nutrient that they want or need. So if you don't feed your gut will feed on you. It will actually strip the mucin layer, the polysaccharide layer that sits on top of the intestinal epithelial cells, that acts as a physical barrier from the junk in your intestine and your bloodstream. It will strip the mucin layer off and expose those intestinal epithelial cells to all the bad stuff that's in your intestine. And that leads to inflammatory bowel disease, irritable bowel syndrome, local gut inflammation, which ultimately leads to systemic inflammation, which leads to chronic metabolic disease. So, fiber is one, big one. Number two, okay, omega-3 fatty acids. You need omega-3 fatty acids. Why? Because omega-3 fatty acids are flexible. They move. They allow for permeability of neurons. They allow for flexibility of neurons. So omega-3s are part of neuronal structure that basically improve and accentuate neurotransmission. Where do you get omega-3s from? Fish, mostly. I mean, you can get some from flax, but mostly from fish, okay? There are 3 omega-3s. There's one called alpha-linolenic acid, which you can get in vegetables and in flax. Then there's EPA, eicosapentaenoic acid, which you only get in fish. And finally, the last one, DHA, which is docosahexaenoic acid, which you also just get in fish. People say, well, I'm vegan. They can get the ALA from fruits and vegetables, no argument. And that has benefits, including cardiovascular protection. But though that ALA does not get converted to EPA or DHA in any appreciable amount, less than 1% in the body, which means that you're actually EPA and DHA deficient, which is a problem. So that's a little bit of an issue. Another thing that's a problem is emulsifiers. So virtually every ultra-processed food has emulsifiers. What are emulsifiers? They're what hold fat and water together. So they have a polar one end and they have a non-polar other end, and that's what holds them together. Emulsifiers basically keep fat and water from separating. This is why when you put your microwave lasagna in the microwave, okay, it doesn't layer out. Fat over here, water down here. It stays together. It's the emulsifiers. So what are emulsifiers? Well, they're detergents. They're what you put in your clothes washer. They are Tide. Okay? They lift the stain out because they allow the fat in the stain to basically mix with the water in the washer in order to be able to come out. So the question is, what happens when you swallow a detergent? You burn a hole in your intestine. We pediatricians in poison control, in the emergency room, have to deal with all these 2-year-olds and 3-year-olds who inadvertently consume Tide Pods. What do you think happens? This is insane. Okay? Well, emulsifiers are strewn throughout ultra-processed foods, specifically to allow that food to live on the shelf. That's a problem. So There are a bunch of things that have to be done in order to make our food supply safe for human consumption.
Okay, if someone consumed all of this, what would they have to do to reverse the damage?
If they consumed all of this in one day or in 1 week,
Let's say they consumed all of this in 1 month,
in 1 month.
one individual.
All right. The answer is it would be a while before you could do anything about the damage. The damage would be pretty fixed. Eventually, you could probably burn off the liver fat. Eventually, you'll replace some of the proteins which will have gotten glycated and, that Maillard reaction that I mentioned. Eventually, your microbiome will come back to normal if you don't keep overfeeding it sugar, like you see here. And eventually, your reward center will, shall we say, calm down. So it is eminently doable to basically mitigate the damage. The most important thing is not to pile on, not to keep doing it. So if you're going to do it once.
Is there any kind of cure for obesity, or is it a simple answer of just eating better?
We have these new medicines called GLP-1 analogs. And I am asked about GLP-1 analogs all the time. Isn't this the answer? Doesn't this work? So I have 3 answers for that. And I hate being wishy-washy about it, but it depends on which hat I'm wearing as to how I feel about them. So I wear 3 hats. I wear my clinician hat, and then I have to take that off and I have to put my scientist hat on, and then I have to take that off and I have to put my public health advocate hat on. And how I feel about those GLP-1 analogs is completely dependent on which hat I'm wearing. If I'm wearing my clinician hat, because I took care of patients for 45 years, I'm glad they're here. They're a tool in the toolbox. They work. 16% weight loss over a year. That's not chicken feed. Okay? If you have morbid obesity, they're an option. And they're a hell of a lot easier and safer and less expensive than bariatric surgery. So for the right patient, I'm for them. Okay. Now let me switch hats. Put my scientist hat on. Why do they work? They work for 2 reasons. First reason, they work on that reward center. They actually dull that reward response, that dopamine that we talked about. So people will tell you the food noise goes away. They tell you they're not excited by the prospect of food anymore, which is really remarkable. Now, sometimes it's a little too much like that and they don't eat, which is a problem. In addition, reward is necessary to get out of bed in the morning. If you're reducing reward, that actually causes problems. People who have reductions in dopamine have clinical depression. There was a medicine that came out in 2006, 20 years ago now. It was an endocannabinoid antagonist. Okay? It was the anti-marijuana drug. It was the anti-munchies drug. How's that? Okay? And it was used for obesity. The name of the medicine was called Rimonabant. It was approved in the European Union. And within 2 months of its approval, 21 suicides. It was never approved here in the United States. And it's off the market. And it has not been replaced by another version to this day. Because we learned that if you basically antagonize reward, life ain't worth living. So I worry about antagonizing reward for that reason. There's definitely an increase in major depressive disorder with GLP-1 analogs. Data are very clear, very robust. We don't see a suicide signal, which is good. So that's a concern. All right. Where else do they work? They work on your GI tract. They work on your stomach. They delay gastric emptying. They delay how fast the food leaves your stomach. which is why they work, because why would you want to put more in your stomach when you haven't gotten rid of your last meal? Okay? The question is that good for you? And the answer is not really. That's not really good for you because it leads to all of the side effects. The nausea, the vomiting, the pancreatitis, the gastroparesis. Stomach turns to stone. 3.4% of people who go on GLP-1 analogs get gastroparesis. And worse yet, when they go off the drug, the gastroparesis doesn't go away. Now, is that a good idea? Not so much. So that's problem number one. Problem number two, you lose weight. Okay, I agree. You lose weight. A lot of it. What kind of weight? Turns out equal amounts of fat and muscle. Now, losing fat is good. Losing muscle is not. The more muscle you lose, the quicker you die. Sarcopenia is a primary risk factor for early death. You're losing equal amounts of fat and muscle. Okay? You don't want to lose muscle. You know what else causes equal loss of fat and muscle? Starvation. And that's how this works, because you're starving because you can't put any food in your stomach. Now, how cool is that? Not so much. If we gave everyone in America who qualified for a GLP-1 analog access to it at its current price, that would be $2.1 trillion to the healthcare system, which is currently at $4.5 trillion. So basically a 50% surcharge over what we're currently paying. Now, that's for 16% weight loss. $2.1 trillion for 16% weight loss. If we just got added sugar out of our diet to USDA guidelines, so if we went from 19 teaspoons of added sugar per day to 12 teaspoons of added sugar per day, so basically a cut by about a third to two-thirds, which we could do, we would get a 29% weight loss. And instead of spending $2.1 trillion, we would save $3.0 trillion. So that's a $5.1 trillion swing for better weight loss and no side effects. Which one makes more sense to you?
Okay, we have a bunch of juices here.
We do.
Which one of these juices is okay for children to have?
None.
None.
None. Children in the 2 to 5 year old age group, because they're smaller, they have less of a capacity for fructose exposure. How much is okay for them? The answer is about 3 teaspoons of added sugar per day, according to the American Heart Association. 3 teaspoons of added sugar per day. That would be basically 12 grams. 12 grams of added sugar per day. That's for the whole day. Each of these, and some of them are higher than others, each of these is greater than 20 grams of added sugar per serving. So if you get 1 serving, you are basically bloating your entire sugar allotment and, basically doubling your limit, and it's just breakfast. So if you send your toddler to preschool and they get the National School Breakfast Program breakfast, which is a bowl of Fruit Loops and a glass of orange juice, they are getting 41 grams of sugar per day when they're entitled to 12, and it's just breakfast. So they're getting more than triple their upper limit, and it's only breakfast. And we have the data on fatty liver in 4 and 5 year olds. We know where it's coming from. So the answer is none.
But let me push back on that. This here, I have in front of me, Honest, according to their label, it says 0 added sugars, and I'll give it to you to look at.
Doesn't matter.
Okay, and it said total sugars is 7.
7? So what is this? I don't even know what it is.
This is Honest.
Honest.
Kids.
Oh, okay. I didn't see that.
Are they being honest
I didn't
with
see
us
that.
or no?
Well, so the no added sugars is a technicality because when you remove the fiber, it's all added. That's
So
basically
because
the way
they're
it works.
potentially squeezing whatever that is, strawberries, whatever that is.
It's going to be absorbed just as rapidly as any of these others because the fiber is missing. So the fruit that this was made from, the bananas and the strawberries, are okay. But as soon as you turn it into juice, then it's a problem.
It's the same as added sugar.
It's basically exactly the same as added sugar. Basically, that's why orange juice and Coca-Cola are not different from each other. Okay? So in Coca-Cola, you can actually call it added sugar. In the orange juice, you would say, well, we didn't add any. So the FDA has actually taken to calling these free sugars instead of added sugars. And with that definition, then orange juice and all these others fall in the same rubric.
For children, is this just a stepping stone to over-consuming sugar in the long run?
Absolutely. So we know that sugar is it's addictive, and kids love it. Why? And babies love it. Why? Because they have taste buds for sweet. They don't have taste buds for salty and sour and bitter and umami yet. They have taste buds for sweet. Why do they have taste buds for sweet? Why do newborns have taste buds for sweet? Because that's how they consume mother's milk. Because mother's milk has lactose, and lactose is very mildly sweet. It's got a sweetness index of 15 compared to, say, sucrose, which has a sweetness index of 100. So that allows the baby to recognize this liquid that's being put into its mouth as something valuable and worthwhile to consume. So babies love sweet. They do not like salty or any of the other tastes. So a simple rule of thumb. Do you have children?
Yes.
How many times do you have to introduce a savory food to an infant before they will accept it?
I don't know.
Median of 13. 13. How many times do you have to introduce a sweet food to an infant before they will accept it?
One.
Once. Just once. Why is that? This is why. All right? And the food industry knows that, and so they're trying to brand kids. So all of these baby foods in jars, take a look at the sugar content, even the savory ones. That's not by accident. That's on purpose. Because the food industry wants the mother to say, oh, look, my kid's eating this. He must like this. Let me go buy some more. And now you've branded the kid and the parent for life, okay? Because you've upped the added sugar, okay? In addition, by the way, these guys over here, okay, those Capri Suns, pouches, okay, that is keeping kids from chewing. Now, this is a little bit different. This has more to do with airway. But the muscles of the face, and there's the masseter, there's the temporalis, and the medial and lateral pterygoids, they're pulling the airway out in order to create a greater diameter, to grow the airway, to allow for more oxygen to enter the lungs. So part of being a baby is sucking in order to create negative pressure on the hard palate to grow that airway, and chewing in order to put those muscles of mastication into practice in order to grow that airway so that you don't end up with problems with oxygenation later. We have two pathologic biomarkers for the fact that that process has gone awry. The first is malocclusion, braces. Everyone needs braces today. That's not just because orthodontists are trying to make money. They are, but that's not why. Because, in fact, all these kids have long faces. Okay? It's called craniofacial dystrophy, and it's because the airway has not grown. Second, obstructive sleep apnea. Because if you don't grow that airway, it's much more likely to collapse. Even in childhood, but certainly later on. And so the degree of malocclusion corresponds with the incidence of obstructive sleep apnea in later life. And the size of the airway dictates whether those two things happen. So these pouches, these juices are actually disabling an important physiologic construct that's necessary for normal craniofacial development and normal oxygenation that leads to metabolic health in the future.
And are parents being misled by the brand and the
Absolutely.
marketing?
No question. We've published on this. The dentists know, the orthodontists know, some functional medicine doctors know, but the industry will not give up this ghost.
If I drink too much soda, which I don't drink soda, but if I did, is it my fault or am I the result of market research?
You are the result of market research, without question. You have the choice to consume that soda at that moment. You don't have the choice of what you consume in general. Another way to say it, which was stated beautifully by the famous German philosopher Arthur Schopenhauer. You have the right to do what you want. You do not have the right to want what you want.
Does accountability come into play?
So, number one, in order to engender accountability, you have to have four things. You have to have knowledge. Okay, well, if you're kept from that knowledge, how can you engender accountability? Number two, you have to have access. If you don't have access, how can you engender accountability? Okay. Number three, you have to basically have affordability. You have to be able to afford your choice, and society has to be able to afford your choice. And right now, we can't afford that choice. And number four, externalities. Your choice can't hurt anyone else. And right now, your choice to consume sodas nonstop is going to put you in the emergency room and require thousands and thousands of dollars for either dialysis for your chronic kidney disease or catheterization to try to open up your coronary arteries, okay, which is basically going to be paid for by the rest of the public because 62% of all insurance is paid by the federal government, which means us. And also, you're taking up room in the emergency room on a gurney and taking up basically a physician's time when he could be doing something else. So your choice does affect me.
Let's talk about your life, Robert. Do you practice what you preach, right? How has all of this changed your diet and how you personally eat, right?
Listen, I was a Swanson's TV dinner kid. My mother had two jobs. She was a New York City school secretary, and she was also the agent for my grandparents' buildings. I was a latchkey kid. I knew how to put a Swanson's frozen TV dinner in the oven. You know, I hated that Salisbury steak with a passion. Okay, but the fried chicken wasn't too bad. Not so great, but anyway. So I grew up thinking ultra-processed food was okay. And I would say that I felt that way for a long time. And then I started doing research. And when I did the research and I started seeing my patients do better because of the changes in diet, it really helped me modify my diet. So my wife and I used to eat out 3 to 4 times a week. Now we eat out about once a month. We buy organic, whereas we didn't used to. You will never find a juice or soda in our house, not possible. Sparkling water only. And, we eat real food. If the food is on the edges of the store, it's fair game. If it's in the shelves, that's off the rails.
What foods do you never touch?
Number one, I'm gluten-free, so in some ways that helps because I know not to consume anything with wheat. And most of the problematic foods are, in that category. What other foods do I never touch? I don't consume food that's, heat and eat. I don't consume food that's, put in the microwave and be done. That's not an option. So, but other than that, I consume real food. I consume meat. I consume fish. I consume vegetables. I try to limit my refined carbohydrate. I'm not going to tell you I have none. I try to have unrefined carbohydrate, like the difference between brown rice and white rice, the difference between gluten-free whole grain bread versus gluten-free processed bread. I try to increase my fiber intake, eat lots of vegetables, and I'm very careful about dessert. It's got to be a damn good dessert for me to consume it. Like last night was my wife's and my anniversary, and we went to a very nice Spanish restaurant. And then there was dessert, and I ended up having one scoop of rum raisin ice cream, and it was absolutely phenomenal.
Okay, so every now and then you'll break your own rules for a bite, so there is something to moderation.
Here's my motto. I am for dessert. For dessert. I am not for dessert for breakfast, lunch, snacks, and dinner. Last night I had dessert.
If there was one, what's the strongest argument against your position?
The only argument against my position is that calories matter more than biochemistry. That's the only argument that matters more. And that's false. And we've proven it 50 ways from Sunday. And I'm not the only one who says that. Even the calorie guru, Dr. Kevin Hall at the NIH, who, by the way, is not at the NIH anymore because of RFK Jr., even he knows that ultra-processed food is bad for a reason having nothing to do with calories. And he is a physicist. He only knows energy intake versus energy expenditure. That's what he measures, and he knows it. So if he knows it, why isn't everyone else?
Are there critics out there, or is it mainly just those brands? Or are there actually critics, people who might have their own point of view? And if so, why?
There are always critics, and there always will be critics. You have to basically have a thick skin to do this job, without question. What I can say is that when I started making noise about this, which started in 2007, so almost 20 years ago, everyone was a critic. The whole world was a critic. I had nothing but critics. In coming from academia and coming from the food industry and coming from politics, there was nothing but criticism. What I can say now is that the clinicians are on board. The academicians are getting on board, not completely, but we've made major inroads. The food industry knows they have a problem. They just haven't figured out what they want to do about it yet. I'm trying to help them. They think I'm their enemy. I'm not. I'm their conscience. I would much rather be their conscience. I want to help them. I actually want to assist them in finding ways out of this debacle that are profitable to them and valuable to humankind. That's my job. That's my goal. And, if they're listening to this right now, call me, okay? We've been working with an offshore food company in the Middle East for the last 5 years called Kuwaiti Danish Dairy, KDD. It's the Nestle of the Middle East, okay? They make all sorts of ultra-processed food. They make flavored milks, they make frozen yogurt, they make ice cream, they make biscuits, they make confectionery, they make tomato sauce, okay? Like all bad stuff. They came to me 5 years ago and said, look, we know we're part of the problem. Kuwait has an 18% diabetes rate and an 80% obesity rate. We don't want to be the problem. Can you help us re-engineer our portfolio to be metabolically healthy? We would like to be a metabolically healthy food company. Can an ultra-processed food company become a metabolically healthy food company? And by the way, we don't have Wall Street quarterly reports. We don't have stakeholders or shareholders. We are privately held, so we can take the long view, and we're willing to put up the money.
Wow.
Wow. So I convened a scientific advisory team of 5 people, each with their own interests and expertise, all within food. My colleague, Tim Harlan, who is a culinary medicine specialist and a chef himself, internist at George Washington University. Rachel Gao, who is a fatty acid expert and ran the first omega-3 for ADD trial at the NIH. Andreas Kornstadt, who is a computer scientist, because we were going to need computer science for this, and Wolfram Alderson, who has been in the food business forever and ever. And we worked with KDD 2 hours at a time, twice a week for 3 years, through the pandemic, over Zoom. And what we did was we came up with a set of principles that basically identified what constituted healthy. And we got it down to 3 principles, 9 words, 3 precepts, 3 clauses, 9 words. Here they are. Protect the liver, feed the gut, support the brain. Any consumable that passes your lips that does all 3 is healthy, whether it's ultra-processed or not. Any consumable that passes your lips that does none of the 3 is poison, whether it's ultra-processed or not. Any consumable that does 1 or 2 but not all 3 is going to be somewhere in the middle. The question is, can you take food that is ultra-processed, that does none of the 3, and turn it into something that does 3 of the 3? And the answer is yes, you can, if you know what you're doing. And so we developed a set of principles. We developed a set of tiers criteria to advance individual products in the KDD portfolio, and there are 180 of them, to go from poison to metabolically healthy. And to KDD's credit, they have turned over 10% of their portfolio over the past 2 years to be metabolically healthy, and they have subjected those foods to rigorous clinical testing at the Dasman Diabetes Institute in Kuwait to demonstrate that they have a reduced glycemic load and a reduced insulin response, thus providing data for metabolic health. So that's pretty good, I would say. So the question is, could we do that here in the United States? And the answer is absolutely we could, no question. But it would require a food company to basically take a gamble. It would require shareholders to withhold their approbation, until the data were in, because, no one wants to lose money. So the question is, can we make a difference in the American food market in order to improve metabolic health? And the answer to that is the jury's still out.
Do you think people want to actually know about the truth about what's in their food, or does the large consensus prefer comfort?
So they say they want to know, but when push comes to shove, they don't want to know. I don't care what's in the food. I care what's been done to the food. Because all food is metabolically healthy. It's what we do to the food that's not. This is a man-made problem. God made the food right. Man took it and screwed it up. So if we get real food back into kids' mouths, we'll solve this problem. That's why I'm so proud of our nonprofit Eat Real. And we're doing it in other ways too. I am the chief medical officer and co-founder of a fiber company. And it's a very specific proprietary fiber that basically turns ultra-processed food back into real food in the intestine. You swallow it along with your breakfast, and the fiber expands like a sponge, and glucose, fructose, sucrose, simple starches get sequestered by the soluble fiber in these sponges, these microsponges, and that reduces the rate of absorption, which reduces the glucose and insulin response. It also generates short-chain fatty acids. It also generates a satiety signal. Also increases microbial diversity. Also clears cancer cells out of the colon. In other words, it recapitulates all the effects of fiber on the food that the food industry took out. We're fixing the food for them. It's fiber replacement therapy. It's called Manch Manch, and you can buy it online today. And I'm very proud of it. And we have double-blind, placebo-controlled data that shows not only is this effective, but valuable.
Is there a world that we live in, a food utopia, where we only eat what benefits us and we love to eat it? It's amazing, right? Like, so big food companies can still make all their money, but they don't have to poison us in the process.
Well, that would be the Garden of Eden. And I don't know if we're ever going to get back there, okay? Because, Adam, ate that apple, and it's all been downhill from there. I don't know the answer to that. Yuval Noah Harari, the famous Israeli historian and philosopher, basically said that agriculture was the single biggest fraud in human existence. Jared Diamond called agriculture the biggest mistake in human history. The only way to make food today is agriculture. So if it's that big a mistake, I'm not sure we're going to get there. But is there a way to make peace with it? Is there a way to balance the trade-offs in both directions? And the answer is yes, but it's going to require a tremendous amount of give and take from all sides. We have to bring all the stakeholders to the table to find the answer that works for everyone at the same time. Is it possible? It is possible. It is possible. You can do it, but everyone has to give.
Dr. Robert Lustig, thank you for coming on Decoded Genius.
Oh, thank you.